The file in front of me should not exist. It came through an encrypted dead drop from a contact inside the People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force, the division responsible for space surveillance and cyber operations. The file is marked with classification stamps I have never seen before, a mix of Mandarin characters and numerical codes that suggest this document bypasses even the highest civilian oversight. What it contains is not speculation. It is observational data from the Yinjiang Radio Telescope Array and the Guo-Shojing Telescope in Yunnan Province. These are instruments that Western intelligence has always suspected were dual-use, built for science, but weaponized for tracking satellites and deep space objects that other nations prefer to keep secret. And in late October of 2025, they were all pointed at one target: 3I Atlas. What they saw has triggered a protocol inside the Chinese Ministry of State Security that we in the West would recognize as an existential threat response. But Beijing is not warning its population. It is fortifying in silence. The document I am holding describes high-resolution imaging of the object during its closest approach to the Sun on October 29th. The images were taken in multiple wavelengths: infrared, ultraviolet, radar, and something the document calls quantum coherence interferometry, a technology that should not exist outside of theoretical physics labs. And what these images show is not a comet. The object has structure. It is not a smooth ellipsoid. It is not a chaotic rubble pile held together by weak gravity. It is angular. The Chinese telescopes captured surface features with resolution down to approximately 50 meters. That is the length of an Olympic swimming pool. At that resolution, on an object that is supposed to be a dirty iceberg tumbling through space, you should see craters, fractures, maybe some jets of sublimating gas. What the images show instead are straight lines, panels, geometric patterns that repeat in a hexagonal grid across one hemisphere of the object. The infrared data is even worse. The object is radiating heat unevenly. One side is cold, consistent with ice and shadow. The other side is hot, far hotter than solar radiation alone can explain. The thermal signature suggests an internal power source operating at approximately 600 degrees Kelvin. That is the operating temperature of a molten salt nuclear reactor. The Chinese concluded in the report, and I am translating loosely here, that the object exhibits techno-signatures inconsistent with natural formation. In intelligence language, that means they think it is a machine. And they think someone built it. Beijing immediately locked down the data. The scientists who processed the images were transferred to a secure facility in the Taihang Mountains. Their families were told they were part of a long-term research sabbatical. That is the same protocol China uses when someone is detained for reasons of state security. The raw image files were wiped from the observatory servers and replaced with lower resolution composites that show nothing unusual, just a fuzzy blob of light that could be any comet. But the leak happened anyway. Someone on the inside, maybe a scientist with a conscience, maybe a military officer who realized that silence is complicity, copied the data to a portable drive and got it out. That drive ended up in my hands 3 days ago. And what I see in these images is proof that we are not alone, and that whoever sent this object does not care if we know. Let us talk about what the object is doing. The orbital elements published by NASA and the International Astronomical Union show 3I Atlas on a hyperbolic trajectory, meaning it came from outside the solar system and will leave the same way. But those are the sanitized numbers. The Chinese data includes velocity measurements taken over a 3-week period using Doppler radar. The object is not following a ballistic path. It is correcting small burns, tiny adjustments to its course that add up over time. On October 7th, as it passed within 28 million kilometers of Mars, the object changed its velocity by 0.03%. That does not sound like much, but in space where there is no friction and every action costs energy, even a small course correction is significant. Comets do not correct their courses. Comets do not have guidance systems. Rocks do not decide where they want to go, but ships do. And the math in this document shows that 3I Atlas adjusted its trajectory to increase its closest approach to Earth. It did not fly by randomly. It aimed for us. The second revelation in the Chinese file is the spectroscopic analysis. I have seen NASA's public spectrum of 3I Atlas, It shows water vapor, carbon monoxide, some dust. Typical comet stuff, nothing alarming. But the Chinese used a different technique called laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. They fired a high-power laser at the object from a ground station in Tibet and analyzed the light reflected back. This technique can identify elements that do not show up in passive observation, and what they found is titanium, aluminum, and rare earth elements like neodymium and europium. These are not naturally occurring in comets. These are industrial metals. Titanium is used in spacecraft hulls because it is light and strong. Neodymium is used in powerful magnets for electric motors and guidance systems. Europium is used in radiation shielding and control rods for reactors. The concentrations are small, parts per million, but they are there. The object is not just rock and ice, it is shedding fragments of something manufactured. Either it is covered in a technological shell, or it is leaking materials from an internal mechanism that is degrading as it heats up near the sun. The reaction from the Chinese government was immediate and coordinated. Within 72 hours of receiving the spectroscopic data, Beijing activated its National Defense Mobilization Committee. This is the body responsible for transitioning the country from peacetime to war readiness. Underground shelters in major cities, which were officially mothballed after the Cold War, have been quietly restocked. Satellite imagery from commercial providers shows convoys of trucks entering the Zhishan tunnel network west of Beijing. These are not military exercises. These are supplies, food, water, medical equipment, enough to sustain millions of people underground for months. The official explanation is a civil defense drill in preparation for natural disasters. But you do not activate your continuity of government bunkers for an earthquake drill. You activate them when you believe the surface will no longer be safe. China is also repositioning its space assets. The Tiangong space station, which has been in a stable orbit for years, suddenly performed a major orbital maneuver in early November. It raised its altitude by nearly 100 kilometers. The official reason given was debris avoidance, but there was no debris in the projected path. What there was, according to the tracking data I cross-referenced, was a trajectory that put the station directly in the path of 3I Atlas's tail. They moved the station to avoid contamination. That tells me they know something about what the object is releasing into space, and they do not want their astronauts exposed to it. Meanwhile, the Chinese lunar relay satellite, Kuekiao, which normally supports far-side moon missions, has been retasked. Its antenna is now pointed not at the moon, but at deep space, tracking something. I believe it is tracking 3I Atlas as it moves away from the sun, monitoring it for any further course changes or transmissions. The document includes a section on signal intelligence. The Chinese have been listening to the object, not just passively recording emissions, but actively trying to decode patterns. 3I Atlas is broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The primary signal is a regular pulse in the L band, around 1.4 gigahertz. That is the same frequency that hydrogen emits naturally, which makes it a universal channel that any technological civilization would monitor. The pulse rate is not random, it is a prime number sequence: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Repeating. This is not a natural phenomenon. Prime numbers do not occur in nature with this kind of regularity. Pulsars emit regular signals, but they are based on rotation rates, not mathematical sequences. This is a beacon. It is announcing itself, and the terrifying part is that the signal is getting stronger as 3I Atlas moves away from the sun and heads toward its closest approach to Earth on December 19th. The signal intensity is increasing. It is not fading with distance. It is amplifying. That means the object is either getting closer to us than the official trajectory suggests, or it is deliberately boosting its transmission power because it wants to be heard. China attempted a response. On November 5th, the Kashgar Deep Space Tracking Station transmitted a reply signal toward the object. It was a simple mathematical handshake, a series of prime numbers followed by basic arithmetic. The kind of message that says, "We understand you, we are intelligent, we are here." The Chinese were trying to establish contact, and they got an answer. The object changed its pulse rate. It went from primes to Fibonacci numbers. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. That is a sequence where each number is the sum of the previous two. It appears in nature, in spirals and growth patterns, but it is also a fundamental concept in mathematics. The object was not just responding, it was escalating the complexity of the conversation. It was testing us. The Chinese sent a second message, this time including basic chemical symbols and a map of the solar system. The object went silent for 6 hours. Then it transmitted a burst of data so complex and so fast that it overwhelmed the receiving equipment. The data is still being analyzed, but preliminary decoding suggests it is a three-dimensional map, not of space, but of something else. Molecular structures maybe, or blueprints. The analysts in the report called it a schematic, a design for something. They do not know what, but they are terrified it is instructions. Now let us talk about what has not been made public. NASA and the European Space Agency have their own data on 3I Atlas. I know this because I have contacts in both organizations who have become increasingly erratic in their behavior over the last month. Scientists who used to publish openly are now silent. Press conferences that were scheduled to discuss the object have been quietly canceled. The Hubble Space Telescope, which was supposed to image 3I Atlas during its solar approach, suffered a sudden malfunction and went into safe mode for 2 weeks. When it came back online, the observation schedule had been scrubbed. The James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful observatory in human history, has not released a single image of the object. The official reason is scheduling conflicts and higher priority targets. But I checked the observation logs. Webb has been pointed at empty space, literally nothing. They are using the most expensive instrument humanity has ever built to stare at darkness, because they do not want to point it at 3I Atlas. They do not want the public to see what they have already seen in private. The blackout is global. Radio telescopes that normally share data openly have stopped publishing observations of the object. The Very Large Array in New Mexico went dark for maintenance during the critical observation window in late October. ALMA in Chile shut down citing electronics failures. The Square Kilometer Array Pathfinder in Australia reported a sudden power grid issue. These are not coincidences. This is coordination. Someone, or more likely a coalition of intelligence agencies, has decided that the public cannot be allowed to see what the instruments are showing. And that decision was made at the highest levels because it takes presidential authority to shut down civilian science infrastructure in multiple countries simultaneously. This is the same playbook used during nuclear weapons development. You classify the science, you silence the scientists, and you control the narrative until you decide what the public needs to know. Except this time, the truth is not a bomb we built. It is a visitor we cannot control. The Chinese document ends with a threat assessment. It is clinical, dispassionate, the kind of analysis written by people who have accepted that the world has changed and their job is to calculate probabilities of survival. The assessment concludes that 3I Atlas represents a Category 1 extinction level event with a confidence interval of 73%. Category 1 means total. It means the end of civilization as we know it. Not because of an impact the object is not going to hit us, but because of what it represents. If it is a probe, then someone sent it. If someone sent it, they know we are here. And if they know we are here and chose to send a probe instead of a message, it means they are not interested in dialogue. They are interested in data. We are being surveyed. Maybe we are being cataloged. Or maybe we are being evaluated for something far worse. The document references historical precedents, the arrival of European ships in the Americas, the introduction of diseases and technologies that indigenous populations could not resist. The analysts believe that if 3I Atlas is the vanguard of contact, we are the indigenous population, and history is not kind to those who are contacted by a more advanced civilization. The final page of the document is a handwritten note in Mandarin. I had it translated. It says, "If this file reaches the outside, share it." The people have a right to know that their governments are preparing for an end they will not survive. The shelters are for the few. The rest of us are expected to die quietly. I'm sharing this now because the window is closing. 3I Atlas will make its closest approach to Earth in less than 3 weeks. If the object is going to do something, that is when it will happen. If it is going to transmit more data, deploy secondary systems, or alter course again, we will know soon. But by the time the truth is undeniable, the elite will already be underground. The doors will be sealed, and you will be left outside, looking up at a sky that has betrayed you. This is not a warning, it is a record, evidence that some of us knew and some of us tried to tell you. What you do with this information is your choice. But know that silence is complicity, and time is no longer on our side. This is the end of the line. The data I am about to share is the last piece of the puzzle, the confirmation that turns suspicion into certainty. While the world is distracted by manufactured crises and celebrity gossip, the astronomical community is silently screaming. The official narrative is that 3I Atlas is a comet that will pass harmlessly by Earth in December. They tell you to get your telescopes ready for a rare show. But the leaked internal memos from the Mauna Kea observatories in Hawaii tell a different story, a story of an object that is defying every model we have. Let's look at the timeline. According to the public ephemeris, 3I Atlas was supposed to be visible to amateur astronomers throughout November. But ask yourself, has anyone you know actually seen it? The forums are full of complaints about bad weather, equipment failure, and mysteriously poor seeing conditions. This is not bad luck. This is electronic warfare. The object is active. It is not just reflecting sunlight. It is manipulating it. The latest report from the Zwicky Transient Facility, which I accessed through a breach in their data pipeline, describes a phenomenon called localized albedo suppression. In plain English, the object is turning itself off. It is darkening its hull to blend in with the background of space. A rock cannot do that. A stealth ship can. The behavior of the object near the sun was the first major red flag. On October 29th, 3I Atlas passed its perihelion. Standard comets heat up, release gas, and brighten. This object did something else. It shifted its spectral output. The public report by astronomers Zhang and Badams mentioned a shift from red to blue light. They called it a chemical anomaly. But the classified annex to their report, which never made it to the preprint server, calls it blue shift due to relativistic acceleration. The object did not just change color, it engaged a drive system. It used the sun's gravity not just for a slingshot, but as a reaction mass for a high-energy burn. The velocity data from that moment is terrifying. It gained speed that defies the laws of unpowered flight. Now, let us talk about the destination. The official trajectory says it will pass Earth at a safe distance of 1.8 astronomical units on December 19th. That is a lie designed to keep you calm. The real trajectory calculated by the Deep Space Tracking Radar at Goldstone before it was taken offline for emergency upgrades shows a much closer approach. The object is maneuvering to place itself into a resonant orbit with Earth. It is not flying by, it is parking. It intends to match our speed and stay with us. Why would an interstellar visitor travel light years just to fly past? It wouldn't. It stops because it has business here. The silence from the major space agencies is deafening. NASA, the European Space Agency JAXA, they are all in lockstep. The International Space Station live feed has been cut more times in the last month than in the previous 10 years combined. Whenever the station's orbit brings it into a viewing angle of 3I Atlas, the screen goes blue. They claim signal loss, but I have the telemetry logs. The signal is strong. They are cutting the video feed manually. They do not want you to see what the astronauts are seeing. There are rumors of a mutiny on board, of astronauts refusing to follow the gag order. But how do you leak a video from space when Houston controls the downlink? We are also seeing physical preparations on the ground that match the timeline of an arrival. The Global Seed Vault in Svalbard, Norway, has received unscheduled shipments of genetic material from every major agricultural nation. They are backing up the biosphere. Why do that now? Unless you expect the original copy to be corrupted. In the US, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is being drained at a record rate, but gas prices are not dropping. Where is the fuel going? It is going to military stockpiles. It is going to power the generators of the deep underground bases that will house the chosen few. They are topping off the tanks of the Ark while telling you everything is fine. The most chilling piece of evidence comes from the SETI Institute. For decades, they have been listening for a signal. On November 14th, they found one. But it did not come from a distant star. It came from inside our solar system. It came from 3I Atlas. The signal was a burst of high-density data, compressed and encrypted. It was directed at Earth, specifically at the northern hemisphere. The sheer volume of information in that burst is staggering. It is petabytes of data transmitted in milliseconds. We do not know what it says, but we know who received it. The signal was intercepted by military receivers, but also by private server farms owned by major tech conglomerates. The billionaires are not just building bunkers, they are building receivers. They made a deal. They are downloading the instructions. What happens next? December 19th is the key date. That is when the object makes its closest approach. If the leaked trajectory is correct, 3I Atlas will enter high Earth orbit and begin its primary mission. We do not know if that mission is observation, communication, or terraforming, but we know that the governments of the world have decided not to fight it. They have decided to hide. They have accepted that they are no longer in charge. The transition of power has already happened. We just haven't been told yet. The question you should be asking is not if this is real. The evidence is all around you, in the silence of the telescopes, in the movement of fleets, in the panic of the elites. The question is, what are you going to do with the time you have left? The window for preparation is closing. If you have a place to go away from the cities, go there. If you have supplies, secure them. Do not wait for the siren. The siren is for those who are meant to die. The silence is your warning. 3I Atlas is here. The exam has begun. And from everything I have seen in the files, we are not expected to pass. Good luck.